Okay, so this is using multiple animators, multiple properties, and multiple range selectors to create this kind of an effect, grow and fade up. So what I'm trying to do here is create a unified animation between two different animators, and each animator is going to handle different properties and different property sets as it moves through. Okay, so I'll just create the text first, grow up and fade up. Okay, so the first thing that I would do here is I would create an initial animation on the position, or the scale rather. So this isn't moving position, it's actually growing. So it's growing from its baseline, which means I don't need to change the grouping alignment here. I can leave the anchor points sitting there on the bottom so that it will grow from the baseline. And I'll scale, I'll only scale the vertical property. So I'll change that nice and tall there so I get a good idea of it, or I'll be able to visualize it quite easily. Next thing I'll do is I'll go into my range selector and I'll specify the width of the range. So I'll have it roughly on 4 characters, or here it's about 25%, so it's about a quarter of the width of the line. And I'm going to animate the offset. Over roughly 3 seconds. Okay, that's okay. And I'll go into the advanced section here and change that to smooth. Play it back, just see how it looks. That looks fine. Okay, now if I was to try and add that fading property to it here, then I can only change it to a lesser number, which means that range selector is always going to try and fade down to that value as the range moves over that piece of text. So what I need to do here is get rid of that and create a second animator which is going to handle the opacity change. Now if I have the animator 1 selected and I go back up to animate, it's going to try and create an opacity change within that animator. So that's the first thing to remember. You need to make sure that your current animators are deselected. Quickest way to do that is just select the text layer itself, and that will deselect the animator. So I go back up to animate, go to opacity, and you'll see that I get a second animator and a second range selector. Now if I change the opacity down here, it will be changed across the entire line because my default range selector is currently set to cover the entire width of the line. Now what I want to do is I want to use this range selector, and I want to use it down here as well. So what I'm going to do is delete the new range selector that just came with the second animator, and duplicate the initial range selector 1, Command D, and drag that selector down into animator 2. So now I've got the same range selector, same width, moving at the same speed across both animators. But this is still pretty much doing the same thing that it would have done if I'd put the opacity change in animator 1. So the next step here is to use this range selector, but use it in a different way by setting it to a subtract mode. So now the subtract mode is going to flip the opacity change outside of the range. So the second range is now identical in width and movement, but it's been flipped to invert the change in opacity to what's outside of the range as opposed to inside of the range. Now, you can say what you want about the aesthetics of it, but that is the idea anyway. And this is going to be something that you encounter a lot when you start working with more complex text changes, where you need to kind of ring fence a property change and keep it away from certain range selectors so that they don't try and incorporate that property change within them. And that is using multiple animators to isolate properties, and then duplicating and reusing and modifying range selectors across different animators.